right, everybody come in and take a seat.
Oh, wow, right on time.
Yeah, so this is a session on data enablement, why companies still fail to democratize data in 2023. Sorry, that's a question. Why companies still fail to democratize data in 2023? Our speaker today is Ben Herzberg. He's the chief scientist and VP of marketing at CDOIQ. Ben is an experienced hacker and a tech and business leader. Ben spent years in leadership positions as a CTO, VP of R&D, and a research leader for companies like Imperva and Cynet. With strong data and cybersecurity experience, Ben is Satori's chief scientist as well as VP of marketing. Ben, take it away. Thank you for being here.
All right. So first of all, hi everybody. So that's me, as you said. Mostly, I'd like to say my experience is mostly in the security space. Spent some years in penetration testing, offensive security, leading red teams, and so on. Led the research at Imperva, CTO of Cynet. Also wrote a book about Snowflake, Snowflake as in the data warehouse, the cloud data warehouse, Snowflake security for A-Press, and joined Satori as a chief scientist about 4 years ago as part of the founding team to lead the research at the company. And one thing led to another, and I also lead marketing now, which is a nice combination. So that's me. I'm sorry about I was speaking a lot this week, so I hope I can make it. I even brought some tea, and let's start with our topic. And feel free, if anyone has any question along the way, feel free. Like, you don't need to wait until the end. If anything doesn't make sense, if you have comments from your experience, feel free. I mean, it's not. Let's not be strangers here. Okay, so there are data enablement. First of all, like many terms in data, in the data space, it can be used to describe several things. And I've even seen some companies in here mention data enablement in slightly different ways. So I thought about making sure we are talking about the right thing. So if anyone wanted to hear about other things, they can go to another room or just at least set our expectations. So basically, it's enabling people in the organization as well as the organization itself to make use of the data we have, both like all the data we have in the organization. So we built all these data lakes, data warehouses, databases. We have lots of data in buckets and in our different cloud providers. How do we use it? In the speed that the business requires. Because some of the companies that I spoke with, I get to one of the perks of my job. I speak with a lot of different companies and different data and security leaders. And in many companies, they have KPIs up to the executive level of, it depends how they put it exactly, but days it takes to access data. For an analyst, for example, like the average time it would take an analyst to get access to data. Sometimes you hear stories like, we were on 54 days it takes on average. Depends on the organization. I think that most organizations are in a happier zone, right? But still, so that is mostly around data enablement. How do we let people use data in terms of everything, in terms of the accessibility, they have the right tools that makes it easier for people, even if they're not technical, to use data. And of course, the security and compliance, which is my main interest. How do we get that to be in the safe way? So before joining Satori, I was in several positions. I had lots of great data. I was the data owner of great data. So as an example, when I was leading the research for Imperva, I don't want to give an advertisement for Imperva, but for those who don't know Imperva, it's a leader in application security, and it secures hundreds of thousands of applications. Of web applications, websites, mobile apps. So we saw millions of attacks per hour on our customers. All sorts of attacks to breach data out, attacks to denial of service attacks, and so on and so forth. And being at that position, we had a lot of data to work with. And we used our data internally as research. We had data scientists, we had security experts, domain experts. We used our data internally to make sure that we hone our capabilities. I'm really selling Imperva now. But really, you have so much data, so you can see the next attacks, the attacks that are unknown yet, and make lots of use with it. And that's great. We made lots of use with that. We built models to find attacks before they are known, and very cool things like that. But other teams wanted a piece of that. They wanted a piece of the treasure. They wanted, for example, customer success wanted access to my data, because if you know which companies are being attacked, for example, you know that these companies are probably not going to leave your services, or I don't know what exactly would their logic be, but they would make sense of it. If someone is, for example, is driving traffic away, you would think maybe they're testing competition. Of course, sales wants a piece of that. Where can we grow? And so on. Every piece of the business, of course, engineering, different teams in engineering working on different products, different capabilities. They want to understand what's happening. I was terrified, to be honest. Because this data, imagine you're working with an application for it can be any web service you can imagine, from a dating app to finance to gambling to lots of different things. You put in there sensitive information, not only your PII, your personal information, but your blood pressure, your preferences, your food preferences, your whatever. A lot of sensitive data. And that was terrifying me as a data owner. It created a challenge. How do I share this data effectively? I could understand the business value, but how would I know that this is cool, this is okay? Basically, that I won't be the one when there's a data breach or when there's a problem that I will pay the price for someone else's KPIs. So that was a very big challenge for me. And I saw this as a trade-off. I can either be a sport and give people access to the data, or I can take away resources from my team to make sure that, for customer success, let's eliminate any PII, anything like that. For that team, we need to do other considerations, like removing geographies, restrictions like that. It was a very hard challenge. I was trying to be an enabling data owner. I wasn't that much so. It was too scary for me, basically, as a data owner. We did share data, but it was very hard to do it as, I would say, as opt-out rather than opt-in, like by default, me sharing the data by default. I wasn't enabled to enable as well. Like having a policy, it's very uncommon. It's not. I'm not disrespecting any company, of course. It's very uncommon for companies to have a good strategy of enable first. Like default is to enable. If you want not to enable, you should opt out. And that's where many companies are headed. So this is just, I like it because it's a comic strip. It shows my position at that time. Like, we could do so much with this data, but then you have all these But zip codes, you should mask them, you should not. And by the way, it's not written in the regulation. It can be you have an audit tomorrow and the auditor is a different one because that one was sick and now he wants certain data not to be masked, to be masked. Hashing is not enough, it's enough, there's all sorts of things. How do we get the data faster to the teams? How do we onboard new teams? And that was me. So basically, let's talk about why is it so important to democratize data, to allow more people to access data. So like Winston Churchill put it, democracy is the worst type of form of government except for all the others. Data democracy, for me, as someone coming from the security space, it's scary. It's scary stuff. So I'm saying that data democracy is the worst form of data governance except for all the others. Like for me, it's a very scary concept, but it's so needed for business. And let's see why. Of course, if you look at all the analysts, like I've read Gartner, Forrester reports, and all of this, part of my job now. So data sharing is a business necessity. They're talking about all the business value of business with increased data sharing and versus businesses that do not share data fast enough with their employees. So the business reason is out there. It reminded me of when everything went API, like banking and everything. Like security teams were really against it. Like we should really make sense of like like how we do it. But business was pushing forward because you have either regulations for it or requirements or business requirements. So data sharing, if you is really a catalyst for business, but it's also very hard. A lot of the sharing is done in a very manual way. Most organizations are doing it in a manual process. Some of it is semi-manual, like having a process in your ServiceNow or Jira or anything like that. But eventually, it's a ticketing system where it still takes manual time to do that. So if you're looking at the, sorry, I feel like I'm slightly losing my voice. Sorry. Yesterday it was much worse. I thought that I wouldn't be able to speak. So if you look at like the data democratization, like why it's bad but still good. First of all, on the bad side, why it's bad, data is a big liability. Like I felt like I could be fired because of me sharing data with other teams, which was true. Not that I was fired, but that I could be fired. I was speaking with a friend of mine in a payment company, and he has data on the 3 big clouds in multiple different platforms, and he says, I can't sleep at night. I'm afraid of going to jail. It makes lots of complications for compliance. You have more people, you need to map more people's access to sensitive data. How do you control that? What are the controls you have on top of that? And it's also an operational challenge. The more people who are exposed to data, especially when there's sensitive data intertwined, the bigger the operational challenge as well. Many of these people are not tech savvy. You need to enable them to use data in other tools as well. But the other column, the good stuff about it is basically it's the business value that's derived because you have a shorter time to value from your data, and more people in the organization can use the data in novel ways. Like the domain experts, like customer success, they would know much better what to do with the data once they play with it than me as a data analyst or a data scientist could provide them with, and faster and better. So everybody wants it, or at least many cases organizations want it. They invest in cloud BI tools or on-prem, but mostly cloud BI tools to enable people that are non-tech to access data. Machine learning, AI is much more simple nowadays. And I think that from my talks, at least in the last few years, it looks like there's much more resonation of that people want to expand in a significant way the number of data users in the organization. We did a survey last year and with 300 data leaders from different companies in growth, in hyper-growth companies and Fortune 500 companies. 75% has active projects of increasing data access. I looked last week, just to make sure before I give the slide, I looked at other reports by analyst report. It resonates. It's not like something that's very surprising. But then again, it's something that a lot of companies are struggling with as well. Part of it is security. Security as a disabler. When security should be an enabler, there are security requirements, and it's always tempting to be risk avert. You want to lower the risk of data finding its way outside or having other security issues. And the more people you have access to data, again, like I was saying, it's terrifying. Compliance, again, the complexities with compliance of having 2 teams access your data versus 200 teams accessing your data. It means from a home kitchen to a restaurant, right? It's a different operation to make sure that you're controlling all of that you can answer your customers' questions about, do you know which ones of your 400 engineers was actually able to access my data, and which one of those 400 engineers did access my data in the last month, and why. It's easy to do that when you're like, we are a 50 people company. It's easier when you're a 5,000 people company or 50,000 or 80,000. That makes it harder. Privacy both because of keeping up with the privacy requirements, both because of enforcing the privacy requirements as is. For example, some of the things that we were really struggling with was regional separation in different companies. It led to very strange architectures with or without regards to security. And also, there are a lot of new privacy regulations or changes in privacy regulations, and following them and acting in the right way, especially for global organizations, is challenging. And operational, the more people, the harder it is. It's also very confusing. Like when we ask people, what's the function that's responsible for securing access to sensitive data? Like I was speaking with the CISO a few months ago, and he said, network, I can see everything. I know where everybody is going to, which websites, if they're in incognito mode, and if they're not in incognito mode. I know what's happening in my network completely. I know what's happening in the endpoint. I know if people install stuff. I know. But when it comes to my data, I just say what's my requirement. I need to pass it on to the data team. So in many companies, there's a complexity in there of who's in charge of data security and the security and the access to sensitive data. And again, the manual processes around it makes it harder to do that at scale. So I would like to say that so a data security platform, the term of what is required to fill the void is a bit confusing. Sometimes it's a data security platform. Like if you ask 2 different analysts from the same analyst companies, For one, it can be data access governance, data security platform, and in some cases, it would be wise to implement such a thing in-house, like do it yourself, write one. In some of the cases, it would be, of course, better to use the platform to do that. But it's something. Did I put a definition? No. But it's something. Let's call it an abstract thing. Let's call it data access governance, data security platform. It doesn't matter. But it's something that it can be a process, it can be a tool, it can be a product that helps you detach the security aspect and the access control aspect from each one of your data stores and manage them in a central location because otherwise it's very hard to scale. Sometimes, like I said, it's wise to build your own solution. Sometimes it's wiser to buy. Summarizing many talks, I summarized it to four items when it's better to build such a system. So one is complexity. The more complex your environment is, the more you will have work maintaining it, when a protocol changes, when something changes in one of the data platforms. But if you have a relatively simple environment, then that would be a good place to buy, to build it on your own. The amount of data access you have going on, do you have requirements, specific requirements to it? Do you want to implement temporary access control, temporary in time, and so on? The more complex it is, the likely you don't want your core teams to do it. You want them to provide the value. The team you have, like, do you have spare data engineers or software engineers to write such a service for you? And the sensitivity of your data. If you are dealing with, you have performance metrics and that's it. And even if they find themselves outside, then okay, not the happiest day, but not that bad, then that's basically also when you would prefer to do it in-house to solve the operational challenge, but you don't have a lot of the other challenges like compliance and security. So that's cats. Those are cats. I took the photo, just not to use stock photo for everything. I took it in Israel, where I live. It's by the seaport in a small southern city called Ashdod. So those are cats. That's how you remember that. So what is a data security platform, or the naming are confusing, but what is a data security platform? I summarized the Gartner definition. Maybe that should have been before when to build it, but it's a data. It can be a service, a product, a tool, a process, but it addresses the diverse protection requirements you have from the compliance, security, privacy, operational, business, and so on, and that you can apply universally on all your data and on all your data access. And you can set common policies across the board for all of your data security to make it streamlined. And the end result is, for the security teams, it would be to know what's going on. And that's not the word of Gartner, obviously, know what's going on. But for security, it's know what's going on. It's also, in many cases, they want to enforce security themselves without the data teams. But they would not like to do a create view or something like that on a database. And for the data users, they want their data fast, and the organization wants that as well. It removes some of the barriers. This is from S&P. It removes many of the common barriers that companies find from being data-driven. Like some of it is around the skilled resources that you need, because if you're doing everything in a very manual way, you need people to actually go into databases and do stuff. You need skilled people. most of the data security requirements, data privacy requirements, and a lot of these requirements. So it takes care of a bunch of, like any good platform, having a data security platform removes a lot of these common barriers at once. And also, data security platforms addresses a lot of the desired value that organizations perceive or want to get from data governance tools. Some of it around risk mitigation, like improved compliance, for example, or improved security handling of data. And a lot of it is around data enablement and with regards to data governance. Like, how do we accelerate analytics while having everything governed? How do we facilitate self-service? People go in, check the data they want, get access to the data, and analyze it on their own. So you don't need to disturb any analytics team for analyzing the data, any data engineering team for getting access to the data. So some of the things that are important around it, the universality to cover a wide array of environments. You want the security to be very dynamic. Like, you want to set it as high up as possible, like as close to the business context as possible. The simplest example, an engineer can access customer data, but not always. They need to put in their purpose, and sensitive data is removed from it. So that is about that, and being fast in delivery. It's not a good idea, like some of the signs wherein you do not really need such a thing and you can deal with less, is when either data analytics are not a growth area, when it's just, you need just an ad hoc product, like you just want to classify sensitive data for an audit and that's it, or when you're very, you're doing the same thing you were doing 10 years ago and you don't have like a big change with a lot of people accessing the data. Mostly it's when it's all on-prem, you don't plan like a big expansion in the data users. So basically it makes if you look at my life back, it would have made my life much simpler when I was a massive data owner. I still am. I own a lot of data, but obviously we use our product for all of the self-service data access. That's about it. So left you some time for snacks, and if you have any questions and anything like that. If you're interested in Snowflake security, obviously feel free to read my book. If you want a copy, I can probably allocate one. And if you'd like to read more about the topic, we write a lot about it in our blog as well as in my personal blog, though I have neglected it for a while. And of course, feel free to keep in touch if you have any questions about it or in general. Thank you.
Ben, thank you very much. So we have ample time for questions if folks have questions. I have one myself, but I'm going to let others go first. There we go. Okay. Well, it helps for the folks who dialed in.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Hi, good morning. Thank you for your talk.
Good morning.
So I'm from a company called Anonymous, and we do advanced de-identification.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see that fitting into enabling democratization of data? Do you think it's the answer to bridge this divide? Do you think? Yeah, that's probably not.
So I don't know exactly. We can discuss afterward, like where exactly what you do. What do you mean by desensitizing data? What we mostly see it, and that's also the direction. If you look at the big data warehouses like Snowflake, Databricks, Redshift are going towards is to dynamically create the differential privacy between different people based on their identity, based on different attributes, attribute-based access control. So if I'm from team A, like the analyst in Germany, the sensitive data, I will not see sensitive data, and then I will only see data of EU customers, for example. So there's different terminology in different platforms, but like with Snowflake, it's row-based policies, or basically it's row-level security, and it's dynamic masking of data. So where does that fit in? It's part of that requirement. Like you want, as an organization, you want to have a policy. You have a clear policy. You know how people should consume the data and in what terms. And then you want to either use the tool, or build the tool to make sure that everybody is indeed doing it and not filling a manual ticket where, at least in some of my previous companies, if you send it Sunday, you would get access. You would send it Monday, you would not get access, or vice versa. You want to have a very clear procedure around anonymization of data, and then you want it enforced. By which tools? It depends on the company and what they're trying to achieve. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, cool. And if you want, we can talk.
Come on back.
Excellent. So Ben, one of my takeaways from the week is that the opportunities in our space change based on technology. Everyone's pretty excited about generative AI, but the problems are familiar problems we've been trying to solve for 30 years. And I think that's a consistent theme of stuff you talked about here. I am curious about whether the current wave of enthusiasm about AI and the investment taking place in generative AI in particular changes the dynamic of what you shared here. Are there new challenges? Are there new opportunities? How does this fit into the current climate?
That's a great question. So I think that you even answered it in the beginning. Like a lot of things around technology, whether it's, at least from my experience, whether it's security, data, a lot of things are repeating. We're seeing a new wave. The core logic remains the same. I don't think that if you would ask a company 30 years ago, would you like the customer list being out there, the answer would be different. So I think that while the technology advances and the use cases are advancing, and it's really amazing to see like every day new innovations around AI, and I think that the core remains the same. You want to be able to have a peace of mind as security teams, as data teams, as the whole organization, and also as me, the individual whose data is protected, or you, so that these processes don't create additional problems. There are some very niche specific problems for LLM, like the ways you can manipulate the engine itself. But basically, you want to make sure that, for example, if you have models, sensitive data does not find its way into it in a way that afterwards would find their way outside, like through manipulations.
That sounds good. As Mark Twain observed, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes across technology waves.
Yeah.
Do we have other questions from the audience? Good. All right. Well, let's give Ben a hand. Thank you.
Thank you.